I'm on a roll tonight. I read 2 of them earlier.
Yeah.
I'm gonna rip this one.
Jeremy's got something to say.
Jeremy's Reaganing on this podcast tonight.
Reaganing.
Trickle down, trickle down.
Welcome to I'd Buy That for $1, a podcast about inexpensive, common, and underappreciated records that are waiting to be rediscovered. I'm your host, Sean Hartman, producer of the hit series, Now That's What I Call Songs That Were Used by Republican Candidates Who Were Then Immediately Ordered to Cease and Desist.
We've mentioned that rather recently on a different episode, and here it is again.
It does come up from time to time. I wonder what song I might be referring to.
Stay tuned to find out.
Yeah.
Well, I'm co-host Jeremy, and I'm excited to talk about this artist today, mostly because they have a band member timeline on Wikipedia, and I just love those.
It's pretty necessary, too. It's a complicated lineup shifts throughout the years.
Is that one of the ones where there's all the different band members in colors? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's looking like The Fall. the UK post-punk band The Fall, who have had many members. It's looking complicated over there. Jeremy's showing this to me from across the room for our listeners. It's very colorful.
Prime podcasting.
Some nerd shit, and I love it.
Well, you're at the right podcast then. Well, I am co-host Peter Cook, and I woke up this morning with a bad hangover, and my podcast was missing again. This happens all the time. It's detachable.
A detachable podcast.
A detachable podcast.
I can only think of one reference, and that does not seem relevant to this, but
I will let it be known later how that's relevant.
Okay.
So many mysteries to be explained on this episode. Everyone's going to have to keep listening now.
Yeah, I think they have to. You hear that, listener? You have to. Sean, tell us what we're listening to this week. Let's at least reveal that much.
We are listening to the 1976 soft rock album Waking and Dreaming by Orleans.
The soft rock takeover continues.
It's back.
It continues. It never stops.
It's a multi-year endeavor now.
That's right. I mean, after Little River Band became our most listened to episode, I think we just have to give the fans what they demand. More soft rock.
Fine.
Yeah. So those fans come back for one more episode. Those tens of thousands of people that have clearly only listened to that episode.
They've been waiting. They're ready.
Well, welcome back. Where did you want to start with of this album, Sean?
Believe it or not, I'd like to start with side A, track 1. It's a song called Reach.
Reach, an almost hit, right? This was a kind of a nearly top 40 hit.
Yes, it just missed the top 40. According to Wikipedia, it hit number 51 on the Billboard chart.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard this out in the world, not as much as another song on this album, but I this felt familiar.
It definitely has the sound like it could be a hit. I like this song a lot, so let's go ahead and listen to it now.
Reach, side A, track 1.
Myself enjoy the space I'm in and all the wonderful places I've been. My eyes are on the future and I can't think about the past.
I haven't listened to these songs in a few days now, and I was trying to recall, like, what does Orleans sound like again? And my brain was just remembering there's a funky guitar, and then there's a stack of soulful male singers that kind of take turns and do harmonies and stuff. My brain was right. That's kind of like the main things going on there.
That did happen. Did you have any impression of Orleans before this? Do you know any of their big hits? Did you think that this was a band or an album to
I
avoid?
think he has to know.
Yeah.
Almost everyone knows a couple Orleans songs.
Yeah, they just may not know it by name, or like, they know the song but not the artist kind of thing.
Yeah, that was me. I was not familiar with this band really, but I definitely know the song Still the One.
Yeah. Really hard not to have heard that one.
I can understand why if someone's just heard Still the One on overheads in grocery stores and whatnot, and haven't actually listened closely to the song, which it rips, and we'll listen to it closely later. But I can, it's just sort of in the air, and people might think it has sort of a generic sentiment. I can understand why people might not feel compelled to dig further into this band, knowing just that song.
Yeah, and if you were someone that was around in 76 and the several years after this where the song was just absolutely everywhere, I could definitely understand how people would get sick of it. When something that's this much of an earworm becomes omnipresent, it's easy to start hating something, even if you liked it the first time you heard it.
Yeah, my association with Orleans is kind of a funny one. I was hanging out with my old coworker from when I worked in retail, Mark Belko. I'm sure you guys have heard Belko stories before. I don't know if he's come up on
Legendary
the podcast.
Coworker.
Yeah.
Who I've never met in person.
Never met him. You just heard a whole lot of stories about him.
Love the guy.
He and I were wandering around one evening, and we weren't our best selves. And when I say wandering around, we're literally on foot, like just wandering around, not our best selves. And we came across an LP in the road, like a warped, beat up, just the record. He picks it up and he's like, it's an Orleans record. And we're both going, what? We know that name. What song do they do? And we're looking at the track listing, and then we see Dance With Me. It was the album with Dance With Me on it. So we both start singing it and coming up with our own, not our best selves version of it. Dance with me, 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 is 3, which that was actually 4. And then we would frequently just randomly mention Orleans to people. It's no Orleans though. It was just an inside joke between us.
Amazing.
And now finally other people understand that.
Yeah, Dance With Me, one of their 2 biggest hits, and that had come out on the album 1 year before the one we're talking about today. That was on 1975's Let There Be Music. So yeah, this is once again us talking about an album that was made under the pressure of a band that finally hit it big unexpectedly and then had to figure out how to follow that up. So this is the follow-up to the big hit.
The follow-up to Dance With Me is this album.
Yes.
They hit again with Still the One, and we'll talk more about that. But yeah, what else do you have for us in the meantime? There sounds like there's a lot of members that we could go through.
There is, and there's plenty of bio to get to, but I had one discussion topic question for you guys before we get into the real meat of this episode. You talked about how these Orleans songs, especially Still the One, is the kind of thing you would hear overhead in a grocery store. So I'm just wondering, what are your guys' like top tier CVS bangers? Like if you're out shopping and this song that you know is cheesy and maybe you're not quote unquote supposed to like it, but when it comes on, you're just so happy. You got any answers for that?
Edison Lighthouse, Love Goes Where My Rosemary Grows. What is it?
I know the one you're talking about though. Good song.
Yeah.
All right, I got one. Barry Gibb and Barbra Streisand, Guilty. Love that song.
I feel like the one I always hear that I'm like, oh, hell yeah, when I hear it in a grocery store is Heart of Glass by Blondie.
That's a good one.
Such a good song. Yeah, I'm way into that.
Yeah, I mean, another one we previously featured a long time ago on the podcast. Hamilton, Joe Frank, and Reynolds. Don't Pull Your Love.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's a fun song.
I'm also feeling strongly obligated to now recommend DJ Hennessy Youngman's CVS Bangers mixes that are out there on the internet.
Yeah, I figured we should probably mention that.
Yeah.
You want to briefly describe what that is for people?
Yeah, it's him playing songs you might hear in a CVS and then doing all the like hype DJ things like the horns and doing the like weird movie voice over it. And yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I could go on and on, Sean. I mean, yeah, Belinda Carlisle, Heaven is a Place on Earth is another one that you're apt to hear in that setting that I still can jam out to.
Yeah. All right, here's two that I love and also are albums that we should definitely feature at some point. Ace, How Long, and Ozark Mountain Daredevil's Jackie Blue.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, I could go on and on, but I think we'll move along here.
Yeah, well, I asked that because I've always counted Orleans Still the One amongst my top tier songs of that nature. Another one being King Harvest, Dancing in the Moonlight, and that song will come up again later in the episode. So there you go.
Eleanor the Turtles is the last one I'll say.
All right. Well, before we dive into the bio, how about we listen to another song?
Okay. Yeah, what do you have? Is it the big one?
Not yet.
We're going to just keep referring back to that song and before we even get to it.
Will we even feature it on this episode? I don't know. We've dodged the hits before.
It's true.
We're going to listen to Side A, Track 2, What I Need.
Just give me the earth underneath my feet and the sun up in the sky above, and let me eat from the fruit of the land and stand beside the one I love. What I need is all I'm asking for. What I need, I wouldn't ask for more. It's not free to ask for what you need. Oh no, just let me drink until I quench my thirst and fill my lungs with clean fresh air. That one sparking mind alone that I am free to follow anywhere. What I need is all I'm asking for. What I need, I wouldn't ask for any more. It's not free to ask for what you need. Oh no.
Hot damn. Hearing that on headphones just now, that's a jam, a banger.
Yeah, I read some reviews saying that like the more up-tempo songs on this album are bad and that this band was only good when they were staying in their lane and doing the soft rock, but I kind of love it when they shred a little bit on there. That song, especially at the beginning, it almost sounds like it could turn into a prog rock song, and then they just drop that tasty chorus on you.
Yeah, what's the deal with that shreddy guitar? I didn't actually read anything about this band, but I noted there's a lot of very good guitar playing on this album.
Well, you know, normally we're talking about a lot of studio musicians and these pro players brought in to kind of supplement these musicians, but in the case of Orleans, it's pretty much all them. This was an incredibly talented band. Everybody in it was multi-instrumentalist. Pretty much everybody was an excellent singer and could do lead vocals. So you got those stacked harmonies throughout. But yeah, on that song, there's 2 different guitar solos, one by John Hall and another by Larry Hoppin, 2 of the founding members of Orleans.
Yeah, John Hall, not to be confused with John S. Hall from the band King Missile.
Yes, do not confuse them.
And that's actually why John S. Hall from King Missile added the S in his name was to not be confused with the guy from Orleans. However, King Missile covered Still the One.
Oh, that's
why
where you're.
That's why I was quoting Detachable Penis by King Missile at the top. And John S. Hall, I saw a live performance where he was talking about the fact that King Missile recorded Still the One for some compilation. And then apparently there was some kind of error where they started sending some of the royalties from the Orleans Still the One to John S. Hall from King Missile for a short time.
Whoa.
At least according to him. Anyway, that is why I went way out there into King Missile territory with my intro, was that oddball connection.
Wild.
Part of the mystery has been revealed.
Yeah. You can still keep listening, though, listener.
Well, they got to know what song was used by a Republican candidate and who was that candidate. They got to know.
Yeah, they got to. They couldn't look it up.
And they want to know if we're going to play it.
The mysteries.
Keep setting up those mysteries.
Well, you guys want to learn about Orleans, who they were, what they did, etc.?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's do just that. They were initially formed as a trio in 1972 with original members and, like I said, multi-instrumentalists John Hall, Larry Hoppin, and Wells Kelly. John and Larry typically did most of the guitar, bass, keyboards, and vocals. Wells was usually the drummer, but in the early days especially, they would pretty much switch instruments every song. And then a few months after the band formed, they decided to bring in Larry's younger brother, Lance Hoppin, who primarily played bass and also was part of those wonderful vocal harmonies that we've heard. To give you just a little bit of backstory before this band started, though, Wells, Larry, and Lance all played in Ithaca, New York-based psych rock band Boffalongo, which released 2 albums on United Artists in 1969 and 1970. When the band Boffalongo split, some of the members went on to form King Harvest, and their biggest hit, Dancing in the Moonlight, was in fact written by Wells Kelly's brother Sherman, who was also in Boffalongo. The original version of Dancing in the Moonlight can actually be found on Boffalongo's second album.
Not to be confused with Thin Lizzy, Dancing in the Moonlight. Which is also, those are both great songs with that very specific title, with different songs. But
Interesting.
yeah.
Original member John Hall was a session player and member of another psych band called Kangaroo, which released 1 album on MGM in 1968. John and Wells Kelly used to play together in a small band called Thunder Frog. One can only hope that Boffalongo, Kangaroo, and Thunder Frog played shows with David Mansfield's Quacky Duck and His Barnyard Friends, as mentioned on our Heaven's Gate episode.
Oh, gotta love those late 60s, early 70s, like psych rock band names.
Yeah, what a bunch of goofballs.
Well, those bands, like, that was what was in, and so that stuff was getting signed, and so these releases that seemed like they should have just been very obscure private press stuff were coming out, not for lack of quality, but just like the wacky names. They were coming out on major labels.
And label executives who knew that they could make money off this weird stuff but had no idea how to pick which ones were going to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know, sign Boffalongo. Maybe they've got some hits.
Kids like that weird stuff.
So Orleans was initially formed when John Hall was just getting off tour playing guitar for Karen Dalton, who was opening up for Santana.
Wow.
One of my all-time faves.
Yep.
Santana.
No, Karen. Santana's good.
Yeah,
I got no hate for Santana, but Karen's one of my all-time faves.
she's next level.
So yeah, after that tour, John Hall decided that he wanted to kind of put down some roots in Woodstock and start his own band. From what I understand, he was also sick of his New York City apartment being broken into.
Valid.
The name Orleans was only supposed to be a temporary placeholder name until they thought of something better, which apparently never happened. When the band formed, they were playing a lot of covers, especially by soul artists such as Alan Toussaint, the Neville Brothers, and the Meters, who are all from New Orleans. Which begs the question, is the correct pronunciation of this band Orleans?
I wondered if you were going to bring that to the table, because I always said Orleans, but I wondered, is it Orleans?
From hearing band members pronounce the band name, it's Orleans, but yeah.
I gotta say, it's funny that temporary placeholder name was so much better than all their names before.
I was thinking, it's like, well, I guess if they didn't have anything better than Orleans, because we saw what they were coming up with before that.
Yeah. Great singers, multi-instrumentalists, couldn't think of band names, but that's fine. So they were a major underground success, especially in the upstate New York area and surrounding. At one point, Rolling Stone magazine called them the best unrecorded band in America. So all this hype was building, and they were signed to ABC Records after performing at some New York City showcases, and they released their debut album, Orleans, in 1973. However, the album did not hit, despite being critically well received.
What if the album was pronounced Orleans?
Yeah, the band is Orleans. The first two albums are Orleans and Orleans 2. They recorded a follow-up in 1974, but ABC initially only released it in Europe as they thought it had no hits. The album was not released in America until 1978 after the band's later success.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Got to hear the early stuff.
The early stuff is very good, I will say. They maybe even a little funkier than this. They've always been an excellent band. After they were dropped from ABC, they, instead of giving up, as many bands probably would have, they went right back to playing those New York City showcases. And they were signed by legendary producer Chuck Plotkin, who at the time was head of A&R at Asylum Records, David Geffen's label. Mm-hmm. Do you guys know the name Chuck Plotkin?
It's not really ringing a bell.
Well, he produced Orleans' album Let There Be Music, and then Waking and Dreaming, and then he basically took the success of the Orleans Association and springboarded it into working on every Bruce Springsteen album from Darkness on the Edge of Town to Devils and Dust.
Oh, okay.
Along with working on many Bob Dylan records and just a whole lot of other stuff. As I said, legendary producer.
Very cool.
He's also one of the people responsible for taking the Nebraska demo tapes recorded onto a cassette that then was in Bruce's pants for several weeks, and figuring out how to take those lo-fi recordings and make them a album that could be sold.
You know, I've in recent times listened to Nebraska closely in headphones, and it had been a long time since I'd really listened to that album, and I can hear just how lo-fi it actually was. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of like plosives and just, it sounds like a tape that had been in somebody's pocket for a while. It's incredible that it was released, packaged as a major label record by a major artist.
Yeah, it's truly wonderful. So their first album with Plotkin, Let There Be Music from 1975, featured re-recorded versions of two songs from their second album, which both became hits, Let There Be Music and Dance With Me. So it's even funnier that ABC thought that there was no hits on the album, because they became very big hits later on. Although they said that a big part of that was Chuck Plotkin's influence. He took those songs and heard something in it that hadn't quite been captured on the ABC recordings, had them redo it, and was a big reason why this band took off. And they said that he taught them a lot about song structure and how to kind of harness their talent and churn out these pop hits for the people.
I'm impressed with the way that they can navigate hitting you with the both the funk and the hook.
Yeah, absolutely. So the infamous album cover for this one, where they're all nude from the waist up, but shot in a way that looks like maybe they're just completely naked. Apparently that was not the band's idea. And also, yes, they are aware that it has frequently been listed on the worst album covers of all time list.
Right next to Toe Fat.
Yeah. Well, before we kind of wrap up the band's bio, let's go ahead and listen to a song. I was thinking maybe Still the One.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Oh, wow. We are playing the hit.
it's happening. Side B, track 1, Still the One.
Listen to it with fresh ears, not overhead speakers in a store's ears.
We've been together since way back when. Sometimes I never wanna see you again, but I want you to know, after all these years, you're still the one I want whispering in my ear. You're still the one I wanna talk to in bed. Still the one that turns my head. We're still having fun, and you're still the one. I look at your face every day, but I never saw it till I went away. When we went together, I just wanted to go. Deep in the desert, I long for the snow. You're still the one that makes me laugh. Still the one that's my better half. We're still having fun, and you're still the one. You're still the one that makes me strong. Still the one I wanna take along. We're still having fun, and you're still the one. Yes, you are.
One of the things that really jumped out to me in listening to that closely on headphones was those lead guitar licks, those dual lead guitar licks that sound like Dickie Betts and Dwayne Allman from the Allman Brothers are suddenly on the track.
Yep.
And it sounds fantastic. They just cut right through. But they're not distracting either. They don't take away from the song.
Yeah, this band is rarely flashy, despite how talented they obviously are. A lot of these choices seem to really serve the song first.
Yeah, that was just one thing that jumped out. I don't know if I had ever appreciated the vocals as much as when listening to it more closely.
Yeah, the vocal harmonies here are pretty much untouchable. And I also want to note the guy doing the lead vocals on that song is Larry Hoppin, who is probably the voice people hear the most or most associate with this group. However, John Hall also did a lot of lead vocals. He was singing lead on the first song we listened to, Reach, and then him and Larry were trading off lead vocals on the second song we listened to, What I Need. John Hall and his wife, Joanna, were actually the primary songwriters for Orleans. So they wrote the song Still the One, but then Larry was the one who did the lead vocals and the lead guitar on that one.
Wow, so a married couple wrote this song.
Yeah, and they didn't even write it about themselves. It was a request for friends of theirs who were about to get a divorce or going through a hard time and wanted a song that could give them some hope or something along those lines, was the story I had read. So they kind of threw the song together real quick, and As often happens with those kind of tossed together last-minute songs, it became their biggest hit.
Yeah, well, that sounds a lot like the aforementioned Eleanor by the Turtles that was basically written in protest of the label requesting another Happy Together. And he's like, all right, I'm going to give you the most generic, sappy song imaginable, and you're going to realize that we should be making more experimental and cutting-edge music, and the label hears it. That's great. That's exactly what we wanted here. We'll put it out as a single, and it's another big hit.
That's how it goes. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this bio real quick. First off, we had mentioned that Orleans was a quartet. However, people looking at this cover might notice that there's actually 5 guys on it. That's because they added a 5th member for this album, drummer Jerry Marotta, who was basically just playing drums. He actually did not sing with the band. They had enough singers already, but...
He's the sibling of Rick Marotta, who we've... I think featured on a record or two in the past.
Interesting. It's all connected.
See it looking on the band member timeline, it looks like they stick to 5 members pretty much from there on out until let's see, till about the mid 90s.
Jeremy wasn't kidding when he said this is what he's here for.
Yeah, having both a member basically limited to bass and then a member who was just there to do drums and percussion really kind of allowed the other guys to focus on their instruments of choice a little more instead of feeling like they had to bounce around and play all kinds of different stuff all the time. So unfortunately, things kind of start to go downhill for Orleans after this album. In early 1977, John quit the band to go solo, and then drummer Jerry quit not long after that and went on to play with Hall & Oates and then later Peter Gabriel. The band has stated that there was a lot of internal conflicts that were growing around this time. One of the big ones was just whose songs got featured. As I mentioned, John Hall and his wife Joanna were the primary songwriters. They wrote all but 3 of the tracks on Waking and Dreaming, and there's definitely some growing friction there as to what was going on. And from what I understand, there was also some serious drug addiction going on that was starting to really impact the band and their how they all got along. They released another album called Forever in 1979, featuring a new lineup after the departed members. The album featured their last hit single, Love Takes Time.
I don't think that one's quite on the level of Dance With Me and Still the One as far as longevity that you still hear it everywhere.
Yeah, definitely a minor hit in comparison. So the band continued on for quite a while with many lineup changes. They've lost a lot of the original members at this point. Drummer Wells Kelly died of a drug overdose in 1982 while on tour with Meatloaf. John Hall was probably one of the most active members of the group. He went on to release multiple solo albums. He also was an outspoken activist and founding member of Muse, Musicians United for Safe Energy.
Not the band.
Yes, the organization. He performed on and co-produced the No Nukes live album, which was presented by the Musicians United for Safe Energy. John rejoined Orleans after Wells Kelly died, and then in the late 80s, he got into politics, and from 2007 to 2011, he served as congressman for New York's 19th district.
Yeah, when I clicked on the hyperlink on his name, I was like, oh, they linked it to the wrong guy.
I don't want to learn about this politician. Let me learn about the musician. Oh, wait. It's the same guy.
One and the same.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess not Republican politician.
Not a Republican politician. And some people said that part of the thing that really inspired him to go into politics like this was when he had to order George Bush to cease and desist his use of their song Still the One in, I believe, 2005.
Wow, there it is. We've now stated that mystery.
No more mystery. So yeah, he was not playing in Orleans while he was a congressman, but he has continued to play with the group off and on until his recent retirement, I believe in 2020, or maybe 2022, not too long ago. Unfortunately, lead singer Larry Hoppen took his own life in 2012. He had been performing with the group and never missed a gig up until that point. At this point, Orleans continues to play with Lance Hoppen as the only original member.
So they're still out there. He's out there doing that with a group behind him.
Yeah. And if you go to their Wikipedia, you can look at that graph and see which members are in the group and whether they've been in it before and for how long. All the information's there.
Jeremy's pulling it up again.
I'm looking at it right now.
It's true. It's there.
Looks like Lane Hoppen is in the band. I'm guessing that's a relative of some sort.
It's true. A third brother joined the group, I believe, in the early 80s.
Cool.
I had
What?
no idea there were so many members of Orleans. You can run into them everywhere you go. I was in Orleans. So was I.
That's probably where that record you found came from. They just like dropped it out of their pocket.
They just fallen onto the pavement.
Well, I'm guessing this is like, T-ball for you here, Sean, but can you give us some recommended similar artists?
Yeah, this one I didn't have to work too hard. It just fell together. It was so easy. First one, an album that I really like, an artist that I really like, who we should feature at some point, Robbie Dupree. And I'm recommending his self-titled album from 1980. Part of why I'm recommending that is because he was actually pretty close with the band Orleans. In fact, Larry and Lance had a side project with Robbie in the 80s called Mood Ring.
Mood Ring.
I can hear that music right now in my head already.
All right, next up, I've got a pretty obscure recommendation. This is a group called SS Fools, who put out a self-titled album in 1976 and then never released another thing. That came out in Columbia, and they disbanded a year later. But it's an excellent, obscure, soft rock, yacht rock album that shouldn't be too hard to find.
I like the name too. They
Yes.
actually did a good job.
Yeah, I like that too.
Last recommendation, one of the best albums from 1976, or at least one of the most slept on, the great Jimmy Spheris and his last official release, Ports of the Heart.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't think we saw that one coming.
Another one that often gets listed on some of the worst album covers of all time. That's the one where he's in his
that's a
Speedo
bad
in the in the pool.
Yeah.
Great album cover. Great album.
You know, I have that one. I bought it at your recommendation when we were out digging one time, and I don't think I've actually listened to it yet. I need to catch up on that one.
You're lost, Peter. It's a good album.
I at least have it. I'll get to it someday. I have a few records like that. Sean, well, thank you for that list, Sean. I wanted to ask, where are you currently at with the band Ambrosia? What is your relationship with the band Ambrosia, Sean?
I'm trying to remember if I bought one of their singles recently. I think I might have.
The two big songs are How Much I Feel and Biggest Part of Me.
Oh, I have a 45 of Biggest Part of Me. That song is awesome.
Okay, yeah, I think that one was from like 1980. Those songs are not on the same album, but they're another group that I just think of, even though they're, I guess, now that I've listened to Orleans more closely, they're different groups, but still that very smooth, harmony-driven 70s stuff.
Yeah, I bought that single when I was going through and just trying to buy a bunch of cheap yacht rock stuff so I could do some full DJ sets of this kind of soft rock stuff that I've come to love recently.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we could feature Ambrosia
Oh, definitely.
on the show. I have a Captain Beefheart record where the label on one side is mistakenly, by error, an Ambrosia label. I don't know if that's a one-off or if a whole bunch of them were pressed that way.
Yeah, it very well could be a one-off. I have found albums like that from time to time, and if you Google it, sometimes you can find people saying like, oh yeah, there's like several hundred where that mistake was made, but it could just be one simple mistake by a random person in the pressing plant that day.
The more baffling part even is that Captain Beefheart and Ambrosia were on the same label
Yeah.
in the late 70s.
Yeah, when you get some of those cool like lost leader comps from the time, I feel like Captain Beefheart is often the one like standout weirdo artist amidst all of the pop hits. They're like, maybe this guy will work. I don't know.
Yeah, he pops up on a few comps I have where he's right next to artists you would never in a million years think of him being in the same company as.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, before we get out of here, we should remind our listeners that you can support the podcast and get more content over at patreon.com/I'd Buy That Podcast. We have early access to episodes, bonus episodes, special mixes, the vinyl tier where we will send you a record and 45 along with a handwritten note. You can find information on how to join and support the podcast over at patreon.com/I'd Buy That Podcast. I went into like full announcer mode there.
Yeah, full marketing voice.
I'm tired, so I needed to spruce things up.
Okay. I'll add the earnest note that we don't make anything from this podcast. We just love doing it, and this money helps get the word out on the podcast and cover our bills.
We just had to pay our annual hosting fees and
Yeah.
get the Zencaster fee comes up now that we pay for the software we record this on and all that good stuff.
Yep. So you're supporting a good cause. We're not going jet setting around the world on your dime.
Yeah. We're not buying expensive private press records with this money.
Maybe we should as an investment and then resell it in a few years. Have even more money. It's foolproof.
Yeah. Well, we'll consider that, but for now, we're not putting it towards that.
Okay.
So check things out over at patreon.com/I'd Buy That Podcast. All right, Sean, what do you have for us to go out on? What are any final thoughts before we get to the final song?
Final thought, this is one of our very easy to find albums that we've talked about. When you go on Discogs, there's way more people that say they have it than people that have it in their want list, which is usually a good indication that it is not very culturally relevant right now and not very in demand. So
Yeah.
sometimes we talk about albums that you might struggle to find it in the $10 under range, but this one should be very cheap just about everywhere.
A little behind the scenes thing, Sean. I don't mean to put you on the spot or call you out here, but Sean realized right before we recorded this episode that he must have sent his copy off to one of our Patreons at the vinyl tier. And it's not going to be hard for you to find a replacement record for us to rip the clips from in the next few days. They're out there, all that you see them everywhere.
Yeah, I imagine I'll find it in the very first dollar bin that I go to, so I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah. It'll be okay.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Well, we are going to go out on the song Spring Fever. It's the last song on the album, side B, track 5. This one has a fairly big feature, a guest musician. It's got a saxophone solo in it by none other than Michael Brecker.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I saw that Linda Ronstadt appears on one song on this album. We're not featuring that song, but yeah, they got a couple pretty big features on this LP.
Yep, Linda's on track 3, If I Don't Have You, and then they also got legendary trumpeter Blue Mitchell to play on one of the songs on this album as well. Also, this track is the only one written by Larry Hoppin, and it's definitely the best song on the album not written by John and Joanna Hall. Larry was the primary songwriter and definitely the band leader after John left, so you can really tell that it makes sense that this band kept going after losing their primary songwriter, because this still feels very much like an Orleans song. Maybe a slightly different vibe than the rest, but this is some classic Orleans stuff by the late, great Larry Hoppin.
Well, thank you, Sean. This was a band we were bound to talk about at some point, but I think it was appropriate to wait until you had gone into your 70s light rock, smooth rock phase.
Oh, I'm all the way in it now. No looking back.
Yeah, it's there. It's just the takeover is here. It's just maybe not every episode, Jeremy. It's just occasionally. Can you handle that?
No.
It's more like the soft rock assimilation.
Did you not like this record, Jeremy?
I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah.
It was enjoyable to have on.
Yeah. It's, if it's not fully your thing, it's not offensive by any means.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, and there were parts that I was like, oh, this kind of jams.
yeah. I mean, I was just the production and the interaction of the instruments and the voices, I think are outstanding.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I look forward to see what we bring next in this vein, Sean.
Oh, it's coming. Don't worry.
I'm worried. And I'm co-host Jeremy.
And I'm co-host Peter Cook.
And I'm Sean Hartman.